A millionaire CEO mocked a young waitress in a high-end Manhattan restaurant, offering her a staggering $1 million if she could serve him in Japanese. But when she accepted the challenge, her response shook him to his core. Before we start, I love seeing this community grow. Feel free to comment where you are watching from and subscribe. Take a moment to picture the scene. Kaze Heights, a restaurant perched high above Manhattan, offering a view so mesmerizing that the city below seems like a mere mirage. The elite come here not only for the food, but for the illusion of untouchable power, whispered secrets over Wagyu beef, and deals made in hushed tones. This is where Aiko Tanaka moves through the bustling crowds, an invisible presence in a world of opulence. For 5 years, Aiko has perfected the art of being seen but never truly noticed, pouring wine without interruption, clearing plates without a glance. At 24, she's fluent in both Japanese and English, but lives in the space between two worlds. Never quite fully American, yet never completely at home in her Japanese heritage. She works at Kaze Heights not because it's her passion, but because it's the best way to support her family and pay for her education, while living the life she's come to accept. But tonight, everything is about to change. As Aiko approaches Table 4, a private booth with a perfect view of the Manhattan skyline, she notices the man at the center of the table. Logan Steele, the billionaire CEO of Steele Industries, is seated with his usual business partners. He's a man whose name is known in every elite circle, a man who controls an empire built on artificial intelligence, and one who has never been afraid to flaunt his wealth. He notices Aiko almost immediately. Her Japanese surname catches his eye, and with a smirk, he decides to turn their interaction into his personal amusement. "Well, I see you speak Japanese," Logan says, leaning back in his seat with a glint of mischief in his eyes. "How about you serve me in the real language, and I'll give you $1 million. What do you say?" Aiko freezes for a moment, her mind racing. She's heard the stories about Logan, his arrogance, his reputation for making others bend to his will. But this feels different. This isn't just about money. It's a challenge to her pride, a test of her heritage. She could walk away, she could laugh it off and let his condescension slide. But something inside her sparks. She has spent her entire life living in the shadows, trying to prove herself. This moment, this challenge, is something she can't let pass by. With a deliberate calm, she meets his eyes and responds, "I'll take your challenge, Mr. Steele, but not for the $1 million. If you want me to serve you, I'll show you something you can't buy." The table goes silent. Logan's smirk falters. He's intrigued now, but Aiko's words are more than just a response. They are a declaration. Aiko's heart pounds as she walks away from the table. She wasn't expecting to feel this rush of adrenaline, but now it's too late to turn back. She loads her tray, her hands steady as she prepares to serve Logan Steele with more than just food. She will serve him a lesson in pride, culture, and the value of respect. The Kaze Heights restaurant may be the world where Logan controls everything, but Aiko knows this. Respect costs nothing, but arrogance comes with a price. As the evening wore on, Logan Steele found himself increasingly unsettled. The $1 million challenge, which had seemed like an amusing game at the start, was losing its appeal. The more Aiko served him, the more his sharp business mind, usually in full control of every situation, felt increasingly challenged. Logan had always prided himself on being able to control every room he entered, every deal he made, and every person he interacted with. Power and wealth were his tools, and with them, he had carved out a world where he was untouchable, a titan in his field. He'd built Steele Industries from the ground up with ruthless efficiency, never once doubting his ability to manipulate situations in his favor. But tonight was different. Tonight there was a quiet force sitting across from him, slipping between the cracks of his carefully constructed empire. Aiko wasn't just serving food, she was challenging him in a way no one ever had. With every word, every impeccably spoken sentence, she stripped away his layers of arrogance. It wasn't her beauty that caught his attention. It wasn't the fact that she spoke Japanese with a precision that left him momentarily speechless. No. What really held his focus was the quiet strength in her demeanor, the pride she held in her heritage, and the humble way she carried herself, never seeking the spotlight, yet commanding it effortlessly. Aiko's presence was like a mirror held up to his own life. She wasn't swayed by wealth or status, and in that, she had an integrity that Logan couldn't quite comprehend. Where he had spent his life building a fortress of material success, Aiko's strength came from something entirely different. She didn't need money. She didn't need status. She didn't need him or anyone else to validate her. She was a person who stood on her own terms, and that realization was unsettling. Logan had expected to be entertained, to watch her struggle and fail. Instead, she had pulled him into a conversation he wasn't prepared for, one that didn't revolve around the value of his money, but the deeper value of character, heritage, and respect. The $1 million. What was it worth now? It seemed insignificant, almost trivial in the face of what Aiko was offering. She was offering him something far more valuable, a glimpse into a world beyond his own, one where true strength didn't come from dominance, but from understanding. As the last of the meal was served and Aiko began to gather the dishes, she paused and turned back to the table. Logan noticed the slight shift in her posture, the way she seemed to gather herself for the final act. She approached him with the grace she had shown all evening, her movements measured and deliberate. Without a word, she placed a small envelope on the table, its sleek surface contrasting sharply with the polished wood. Logan's curiosity piqued, and he reached for the envelope, feeling a strange tension coil in his chest. "Thank you, Mr. Steele," Aiko said softly, her voice steady but tinged with something he couldn't quite place. "I hope you've learned something tonight." Logan glanced up at her, his brow furrowed, but she had already turned to walk away. He watched her go, a quiet intensity lingering in her every step. He opened the envelope, his fingers slightly trembling, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The note was written entirely in Japanese, the elegant strokes of the characters somehow more profound than any words he had ever encountered. Logan's eyes scanned the paper, his mind racing to translate the meaning. The message was simple, yet deep. True strength is not in dominance, but in the ability to remain calm under pressure. Logan read the words again, and for the first time that evening, his mind went silent. The familiar buzz of thoughts, strategies, and calculations stilled. He felt as though he had been struck by a sudden realization, like a light being switched on in a dark room. Aiko's words echoed in his mind, each one landing with a weight he couldn't ignore. This wasn't just a challenge to his ego. It was a challenge to his entire worldview. Logan had built his empire on the belief that power was something you controlled, that success came from mastering others and dictating outcomes. But Aiko had shown him a different kind of power, one that wasn't loud or brash, one that didn't rely on force or intimidation. It was a power rooted in calmness, in restraint, in understanding that strength wasn't about dominating every room, but about knowing when to stand firm and when to let go. The realization stunned him. For the first time in years, he felt vulnerable. He had never thought about power in this way before. He had spent so much of his life chasing success, assuming it was the only thing that mattered. But now he questioned everything he had built. Aiko had made him see that power and respect didn't have to come at the expense of humanity or humility. The room felt smaller suddenly, the weight of his own thoughts pressing down on him. The challenge that had started as a joke, an offer of money, a simple test of language, had turned into something far more profound, Aiko hadn't just won his challenge. She had cracked open a door to a world he hadn't known existed. And for the first time, Logan wasn't sure he was the one in control. As the waiter came to clear the table, Logan remained silent, his thoughts swirling. He was no longer thinking about the dinner, about the power he wielded, or about the money he could offer. He was thinking about Aiko, the woman who had come into his life like a quiet storm and left him questioning everything he knew about himself. She had shown him that the true measure of strength wasn't in the wealth you commanded or the deals you made. It was in your ability to see beyond yourself, to learn, and to grow. And for the first time, Logan found himself eager to learn from her, to understand the kind of power she had. Logan Steele was no longer the man he had been when he walked into Kaze Heights tonight. Something had shifted, and he wasn't sure where this new path would lead, but he knew one thing for certain. Aiko Tanaka was no longer just a waitress. She was the one who had changed the game. She had never imagined that a simple dinner shift would turn into something so consequential. But here she was, standing before Logan Steele, accepting a challenge she had no intention of losing. Logan watched her with a knowing smirk, his blue eyes narrowed, as though he was certain this would be easy.
The $1 million offer was just another game to him, another opportunity to showcase his wealth and power. To him, Aiko was just a waitress, an unimportant piece in his world of privilege and influence. He'd thrown the gauntlet down, expecting her to back down or, at the very least, fail spectacularly. But Aiko had her own plan. As she returned to the table to deliver the sake, Logan leaned back in his chair, his body language dripping with condescension.
"So, Miss Tanaka," he began, his voice dripping with mockery. "Ready to prove me wrong?" Aiko met his gaze, her expression calm and composed. "I'll take your challenge, Mr. Steele. But not for the $1 million. I have no need for your money." Her voice was steady, controlled. She didn't flinch under his scrutiny. Logan raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her response. "Oh? And what exactly do you want, then?" The question was laced with both curiosity and amusement. He thought he had her figured out. She was just a girl who didn't know when to back down. Aiko's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. "I want to show you that power isn't about money or status. It's about something much deeper. And you'll leave this table with more than a lesson in language. You'll leave with a lesson in humility." She walked away, his laughter trailing behind her. To him, this was just another one of those trivial challenges, an easy bet. But Aiko knew that tonight, the stakes were higher than he could ever imagine. As she approached the table once more, her mind was focused. She had always been taught that her language was a bridge between worlds, not a tool for mockery. Her mother had always reminded her that language carried the weight of history, dignity, and respect. And Aiko intended to wield it with every ounce of power it possessed. With a practiced grace, she placed the sake before Logan, her movements fluid and confident. As she began to pour, her voice shifted seamlessly into the soft, melodic cadence of her native tongue.
"Your sake, Mr. Steele," Aiko said, the words flowing effortlessly.
She watched his reaction closely, noting the moment he seemed to freeze, his gaze locking onto hers with renewed intensity. Logan had expected a foreign, clumsy attempt at Japanese, something awkward and forced. But Aiko's Japanese was nothing like that. It was perfect, precise, with a rich accent that spoke of heritage, of tradition. The clarity of her words, the ease with which she spoke, immediately caught him off guard. For the first time that evening, Logan felt something shift. Aiko wasn't just serving him. She was speaking to him. The words she spoke carried weight, as if each syllable was an invitation into a world he hadn't bothered to understand. There was power in how she wielded her language, something beyond mere communication. As she finished pouring, she stood there for a moment, her hands steady and her posture unyielding. The silence between them grew thick, the weight of her presence pressing down on Logan. He opened his mouth, but the words he had planned seemed to catch in his throat. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. Aiko had transformed into something far more formidable. "Your order, Mr. Steele?" Aiko asked, her voice unwavering. Logan blinked, momentarily lost for words. He wasn't used to this. He was the one who controlled the room, the one who dictated the terms. But Aiko's quiet confidence had dismantled his defenses, piece by piece. His gaze flickered to his business partners, who were now observing the exchange with curiosity. Aiko's presence, her composure, was undeniable. The arrogance he had relied on to dominate the room suddenly felt trivial. For the next several minutes, Aiko continued to serve the table, her Japanese flowing effortlessly as she described the menu and made polite conversation. But she wasn't just taking his order. With every phrase, every word, she was subtly challenging him. Her words were more than just a service.
They were an invitation to examine his own perceptions, his own beliefs about power and control. Then, as the meal progressed, she dropped a proverb into the conversation that made Logan's pulse quicken. It wasn't something he expected from a waitress. It wasn't something you found in textbooks or language apps. It was something far more profound. True strength is not in dominance, but in the ability to remain calm under pressure, Aiko said, her voice soft but cutting through the noise around them like a blade. Logan's expression faltered. The words hit him harder than he cared to admit. He had spent his entire life in pursuit of power, accumulating wealth and status as if they were the ultimate goals. But Aiko's words, spoken so simply, so calmly, made him question everything he thought he knew about strength. It wasn't about control. It wasn't about the money in his wallet or the empire he had built. It was about something deeper, something that money could never buy. His thoughts swirled, and the weight of the challenge, the stakes, became clear to him. He wasn't just here to offer $1 million for a performance. Aiko had flipped the script. She wasn't trying to win his money. She was using this moment to show him something far more valuable. Logan leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. For the first time, he wasn't sure if he was winning. He wasn't sure if he ever had been. Aiko's challenge had only just begun, but she had already made her mark. In the days following their encounter at Kaze Heights, Logan Steele found himself in a mental whirlwind. The $1 million challenge, which he had initially dismissed as a trivial game, now seemed insignificant in comparison to the puzzle that was Aiko Tanaka. He couldn't stop thinking about her, the way her words had pierced through his carefully built walls, the quiet confidence in her every movement, the power she had shown without raising her voice. Aiko wasn't like anyone he had ever met. She hadn't been impressed by his wealth, his status, or even the offer of $1 million. And that, more than anything, intrigued him. For the first time, he felt vulnerable in the face of someone who didn't need him, someone who didn't want anything from him. It was a concept that had always been foreign to him. People who weren't interested in what he could give them, who weren't swayed by his power. Logan had spent years building his empire, shaping his identity around his wealth and influence. But now, after meeting Aiko, he began to question whether those things were enough. Was he truly happy? Did he even know who he was outside of his business? For the first time in a long time, Logan wondered if there was more to life than just power and money. He couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to understand Aiko better. The way she had held herself, the pride in her heritage, her refusal to be anything other than who she was, those things spoke to him in a way that nothing else ever had. Logan didn't just want to know her for the challenge. He wanted to know her as a person, to understand what made her tick, to learn from her. On the fourth day after their encounter, Logan found himself at the door of Kaze Heights once more. But this time, he wasn't a customer. He wasn't there to make deals or enjoy a meal. He He was there because, for the first time in years, he felt the need to seek answers. Answers that only Aiko could provide. He stepped into the restaurant, the familiar scent of fresh sashimi and grilled fish hanging in the air. The elegant ambiance, the soft lighting, the quiet murmurs of power players discussing deals. It was all still there, unchanged. But Logan felt different. It was as if he had stepped into a new world, one where his usual arrogance and control no longer held any weight. As he walked toward the host stand, his eyes scanning the restaurant, he saw Aiko at the far end, gliding between tables with the same practiced grace he had noticed before. She was in her element, unbothered by the powerhouses surrounding her, her presence commanding yet humble at the same time. Logan's heart raced as he took a deep breath and walked toward her. "Aiko?" he called softly. She turned, her face betraying nothing, but the slight furrow of her brow indicated her surprise. "Mr. Steele," she greeted, her voice calm, yet carrying a weight that made his name sound almost foreign in her mouth. "I'd like to speak with you," Logan said, his words tentative. He had never been one to ask for permission, but this felt different. This felt like something he needed, something he couldn't ignore. Aiko studied him for a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if assessing his sincerity. Finally, she nodded. "Follow me." She led him to a small, quiet corner of the restaurant, away from the noise and bustle of the main dining area. The subtle click of her heels on the hardwood floor seemed louder in the silence, and Logan couldn't help but notice how at ease she seemed in this world, even as he felt like an intruder in it. Once they were seated, Aiko folded her hands in front of her, her posture impeccable. Logan, on the other hand, found himself shifting in his seat, feeling out of place. This wasn't a business meeting, or a dinner for pleasure. This was personal, and it felt unlike anything he had ever experienced. "I don't want your money," Aiko said, cutting to the heart of the matter as soon as they were seated. Her words were firm, but there was no hostility in her voice, just a quiet certainty. Logan blinked, taken aback. He had expected her to soften her stance, to at least acknowledge the power imbalance between them, but Aiko had never played by those rules. "I didn't think you did," Logan replied, his voice quieter than usual. "But I've been thinking about what you said, about the way you look at the world, the way you stand firm in your beliefs." Aiko's gaze didn't waver. "I stand firm because I have to," she said simply. "I come from a place where survival means more than just existing. It means holding on to what matters, no matter how hard the world tries to push you off your path. I've had to fight for everything, my heritage, my family, my independence. I don't need anyone's help to survive, and I certainly don't need charity." Logan listened, feeling a pang of something unfamiliar. Respect, maybe. He had never heard someone speak with such conviction, someone who didn't ask for anything, not even validation. "I get it now," Logan said slowly, his voice almost a whisper. "You don't need me. And that's what makes you different. What makes you stronger than anyone I've ever known." Aiko remained silent, but her expression softened just a fraction. It wasn't approval, but it was something akin to understanding. Logan leaned forward slightly, his gaze locking with hers. "I want to understand you more, Aiko. I've been living in a world where everything can be bought, everything can be controlled. But you've shown me that there's more to strength than money and power." Aiko's eyes flickered, just for a moment, to the side. She wasn't used to this raw honesty, this admission of weakness from someone like Logan Steele. But in that moment, she saw him, not as the CEO or the billionaire, but as someone who, for the first time, was trying to make sense of a world he had never really understood. "What do you want, Logan?" Aiko asked, her voice softening as she leaned back slightly in her chair. "I want to learn. I want to grow. And I want to know who you are," he said, his words carrying a weight he hadn't anticipated. Aiko studied him for a long moment, and in that silence, Logan felt something shift again. It wasn't about business. It wasn't about money. It was about something deeper, something that transcended their vastly different worlds.
"I think you're already learning," Aiko said quietly. "But don't expect me to make it easy for you."
Logan smiled, a genuine smile this time, the kind that came from understanding rather than arrogance. "I wouldn't want it any other way." And so, in that small corner of the restaurant, surrounded by the quiet hum of life continuing around them, Logan and Aiko began to see the first cracks in the walls they had built around themselves. Their worlds were different, but in this moment, they were connected by something neither of them had anticipated. Chapter 5. Challenges in their growing relationship. The more Logan tried to pull Aiko into his world, the further she seemed to push away. It had only been a few weeks since their meeting at Kaze Heights, but already Logan felt the weight of their differences pressing down on him. Every time he tried to offer her a glimpse into the life he had built, the luxury, the power, the privilege, she would smile, politely decline, and retreat further into her own space. It was as though the more he wanted to pull her into his world, the more she wanted to stay firmly planted in her own. At first, he had been intrigued by her refusal. Aiko had always been a challenge, someone who made him rethink his assumptions. But now, it was beginning to frustrate him. Logan Steele was a man who was used to getting what he wanted. Whether it was a business deal, a venture, or a person, he could control it all with the right amount of persuasion, money, or influence. Yet Aiko was different. She didn't need him. She didn't need his money. She didn't need anything he had to offer. That, more than anything, was what made her a puzzle he couldn't solve. Logan had tried, time and time again, to bring her into his world. He invited her to events, exclusive gatherings with the city's most influential people. He suggested that she join him on business trips to Paris, Tokyo, or London. He even offered her a position at Steel Industries, confident that she would jump at the opportunity to be a part of the empire he had built. But each time, Aiko had politely turned him down. "I don't want to be part of your world, Logan," she had told him one night after he made another offer. Her voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable firmness to it. "I have my own path, my own way of doing things. I don't need your wealth or your position. I want to make my own success." Logan stared at her, disbelief coloring his expression. "You don't understand, Aiko. I can offer you everything. You don't have to work this hard. You don't have to struggle. You could have everything if you just let me help." Aiko shook her head, her eyes never leaving his. "That's just it, Logan. I don't want everything. I don't want to rely on anyone or anything. I'm not looking for charity." Her words hit him harder than he expected. Logan had never considered himself to be offering charity. He was offering opportunity. He had always seen wealth as a tool, something to be wielded for the benefit of others. But Aiko wasn't looking for tools. She wasn't looking to be rescued. She was determined to stand on her own 2 feet, even if it meant facing the world with all its challenges. For the first time in his life, Logan wasn't sure how to fix the problem. He was a man who solved problems for a living, especially people problems. But Aiko wasn't a problem to be solved. She was a person who didn't need him, and that realization made him feel more vulnerable than he ever had before. Meanwhile, Aiko had her own struggles to contend with. Her family, particularly her mother, was growing increasingly concerned about her refusal to accept Logan's offers. To them, it was simple. Aiko had found someone who could provide a better life for her and her family. Why wasn't she taking the opportunity? "You don't have to keep working so hard, Aiko," her mother had said during one of their weekly phone calls. "Logan Steele is offering you a life most people can only dream of. Why are you turning him down?" Aiko had sighed, trying to explain her position. "I don't want to be a part of his world. I don't want to rely on him, no matter how much he offers me. I want to build my own life, on my own terms. Her mother didn't understand. But why? It's right there for you. A comfortable life, no struggles, no need to worry about the future. You're not getting any younger, Aiko. Why not take this chance? Aiko felt the weight of her mother's words, but she remained firm. She loved her family dearly, but she couldn't let their expectations dictate her life. She had spent too long fighting to forge her own path, and she wasn't about to let anyone, least of all Logan, force her to take a shortcut. The pressure was building, from both sides. Logan's world was seductive, filled with luxuries and promises, but Aiko's heart remained steadfast. She wasn't going to give up her independence for a life of comfort. She needed to prove to herself that she could thrive without relying on someone else's power. And Logan, frustrated by her refusal, began to see that no matter how much he tried to give her, it would never be enough. He could buy her gifts, take her on trips, offer her a place in his world, but he could never give her what she truly wanted: respect. The kind of respect that came from standing on her own, not from being handed a golden ticket to the life he had created. Their relationship, which had started with a spark of mutual respect and curiosity, was now caught in a push-pull dynamic. Logan wanted Aiko to be part of his world. Aiko wanted to remain free of it. The tension between them was palpable, but neither could bring themselves to back down. And so the challenges continued, each one deepening their connection, but also testing their boundaries. Logan found himself grappling with his own desire to protect Aiko, to shield her from the harsh realities of the world he inhabited. But Aiko, as always, was resolute. She wasn't asking for his protection. She wasn't asking for anything, except the space to grow on her own terms. It was a struggle that neither of them fully understood, but one thing was clear. The bond they shared was only growing stronger. But would it be enough to overcome the divide between their worlds? As Logan Steele sat in his office, overlooking the sprawling city skyline, a sense of unease gnawed at him. The once familiar hum of his business empire now felt different, distant, almost foreign. His connection to Aiko, though still a personal matter, was beginning to ripple through every aspect of his life, especially his work. What had started as a spark of curiosity was now a full-blown fire, and its consequences were becoming harder to ignore. In the boardrooms of Steel Industries, whispers had begun. Rivals, always watching for weaknesses, had started to notice something about Logan. It wasn't the numbers on the bottom line, or his business dealings. Those were always sharp, calculated, and controlled. It was Aiko. They didn't understand her. Didn't know why Logan, the self-made billionaire, had taken an interest in someone so different from the women in his usual circles. The murmurs turned into doubts. There were questions now about Logan's decision-making. Was Aiko influencing him? Could she be compromising his business? Some wondered if the young waitress from Kaze Heights was a liability, someone who had distracted him from the cutthroat world he had mastered. To Logan's rivals, the idea of his attention being split between them and Aiko was an opportunity they couldn't let pass by. If they could plant enough seeds of doubt in his mind, they could weaken him, make him vulnerable. It wasn't long before the first subtle moves were made. One of his closest competitors, William Branson, had sent a message under the guise of concern. Logan,
I hope you're still making decisions with clarity. I heard things about your associates. We can't afford to let personal matters cloud business judgment. Logan had read the message more than once, feeling the weight of its implications. He was used to rivals using any angle to gain an advantage, but this felt different. This wasn't about taking his clients or outbidding him on a project. This was personal. The mention of Aiko as an associate grated on him. She wasn't his associate. She was his choice. Yet in that moment, Logan couldn't help but wonder if they were right. Was his growing connection to Aiko starting to cloud his judgment? Was he becoming too distracted? He pushed the thought aside, but it lingered. Across town,
Aiko had her own struggles. Though she still resisted Logan's attempts to bring her into his world of luxury and power, her influence was undeniable. Her intelligence, sharp and perceptive, had started to seep into his business in ways he hadn't expected. It wasn't grand gestures or overt strategies, it was more subtle. Her perspective on things he hadn't considered before. Her understanding of culture, history, and tradition that shifted his approach to problems. At first, Logan had dismissed her influence as insignificant. After all, she wasn't involved in his business. But soon, her advice started to resonate in unexpected ways. When a major deal with a Japanese conglomerate seemed to be faltering, it was Aiko's quiet observation that saved it. Logan had been stuck, unable to break through the cultural barriers that had emerged during negotiations. He had tried everything: data-driven decisions, cold logic, hard pushes, but Aiko had seen things differently. She didn't approach it as a business transaction. Instead, she suggested focusing on long-standing relationships, respecting the deep-rooted traditions of the Japanese business world, where trust was often built over time, not just numbers. Her approach had worked, and the deal was salvaged. Logan had been impressed. More importantly, he realized that Aiko's understanding of the world wasn't just valuable, it was necessary. Yet, even though he saw her influence working in his favor, Aiko remained adamant about staying away from his empire. "I don't belong in your world, Logan," she would often say. "I'm not interested in being part of your business, no matter how much you try to pull me in." Her words stung, but Logan understood. She wasn't like the women he was used to, who saw his success and were quick to align themselves with it. Aiko wasn't interested in being a part of the glittering empire he had built. She wanted to carve her own path, and Logan couldn't help but admire her for it. But as much as he respected her independence, it also frustrated him. Why couldn't she see that his world wasn't a trap? Why couldn't she understand that he wanted her by his side, not as a business partner, but as something more? The distance between them, the walls Aiko kept building around herself, made him feel like he was chasing something he couldn't quite reach. And now, as their relationship grew, so did the pressure from his world. In the background, whispers began to surface. His ex-girlfriend, Veronica, had always been a presence in his business life, and though they were no longer romantically involved, she remained a fixture in his corporate dealings. Veronica was the kind of woman who had always been at ease with Logan's world. She understood the politics, the power plays, and how to navigate them. She had also never liked the idea of Aiko's influence on Logan. It started with small, subtle comments. At business meetings, Veronica would make sure to mention how much easier things were when Logan made decisions with a clear head, not clouded by distractions. She would suggest that Logan needed to focus on his real priorities, not get caught up in personal matters that didn't benefit him. At first, Logan hadn't paid much attention. But over time, he started noticing the way Veronica's remarks seemed to chip away at Aiko's place in his life. Veronica wasn't just trying to get Logan back. She was trying to remind him of the world he had built. The world where power, money, and influence were everything. Aiko felt the weight of Logan's world pressing down on her, even as she tried to distance herself from it. She had always been proud of her independence, but the more Logan offered, the more she began to feel like she was being pulled into something she didn't want. It wasn't about him. It was about the world that came with him. She could feel the tension building. The more Logan tried to draw her into his life, the more she pushed away. Yet, the pull was undeniable. They were two people from very different worlds, and no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't seem to escape the gravity between them. Aiko wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. Whatever path she chose, it wouldn't be easy. Logan sat in his office, staring at the screen in front of him. The numbers blurred together as his mind raced. Steel Industries was facing the kind of crisis that threatened to dismantle everything he had built. A series of high-stakes deals were beginning to unravel, and the whispers of his rivals had turned into full-blown attacks. The world he had meticulously crafted, one built on control, strategy, and the calculated precision of his business acumen, was now slipping through his fingers. His usual response to a crisis was clear: tighten his grip, control the narrative, outsmart the opposition. But this time, something felt different. The pressure was mounting, and for the first time in his career, Logan found himself questioning whether his usual methods were enough. His decisions, though always logical and driven by the numbers, were missing something. He had always relied on his intellect, his drive, and his vast resources to weather any storm. But now, as the pieces of his empire began to fracture, Logan couldn't shake the feeling that his approach had been too narrow. He was no longer just facing external threats. There was an internal fracture, too. His business, his decisions, they were lacking something crucial. Aiko. It was her influence that had started to reshape the way he saw the world. Her perspective, her understanding of culture and empathy, had become an unexpected asset. When the deal with the Japanese conglomerate had almost fallen apart, it wasn't Logan's sharp negotiation skills that had salvaged it. It had been Aiko's wisdom, her understanding of relationships, and the importance of trust. She had spoken of history and tradition, the weight of family names, and the long-term relationships that built strong business deals. Logan had been forced to acknowledge something that had always been there, just beneath the surface. Aiko's insights weren't just valuable, they were necessary. Her approach to business, so different from his own, brought a level of cultural awareness and depth that he had never considered. But as Logan leaned more on her insights, a divide began to grow between them. He found himself asking for her opinion on more and more of his decisions, subtly incorporating her suggestions into his strategy. At first, Aiko had been open to sharing her thoughts. But as the pressure built, Logan began to notice that she was becoming more distant. It wasn't just business anymore. It was about power. The very thing Aiko had always resisted. Logan realized that, in his desperation to keep her close, he was inadvertently dragging her into a world she had never wanted to be a part of. His reliance on her insights, though invaluable, had started to create an uncomfortable power dynamic. He was leaning on her in a way that made her uncomfortable, and in doing so, he was jeopardizing not only his business, but their relationship. Aiko was too proud to be anyone's asset. She wasn't a tool to be used in Logan's game of business and power. She had always fought to stand on her own, and now she was faced with a decision. Could she continue to help Logan without being pulled into his world, or would she have to walk away from it all? The decision weighed heavily on her. Aiko had always known that her connection to Logan, though intense, was complicated. She had resisted his attempts to draw her into his world, knowing that it would come with its own set of challenges. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she was at a crossroads. She could stay and continue to help him, but at what cost? Would she lose herself in the process? Or could she carve out a path that remained true to her values, independent, self-reliant, and free from the trappings of wealth and power? In the end, Aiko knew that she couldn't abandon the life she had built for herself, but at the same time, she couldn't ignore the deep connection she had with Logan, the way their worlds, though different, seemed to complement each other in unexpected ways. She had come to care for him, not because of his wealth, but because of his vulnerabilities, his desire to be more than just a businessman. Logan, for his part, was grappling with his own realization. He had spent his life building a fortress around himself, surrounding himself with wealth, influence, and the control that had always come so easily. But now with Aiko, he was being forced to confront something much deeper:
the vulnerability that came with true connection, the humility that came with accepting help, and the strength it took to change. Desperate to keep her close, Logan made an offer. He wasn't going to lose her to his own pride, not when she had already made such a profound impact on his life. He sat across from her in his office, the weight of his decision heavy in the air. "Aiko," he began, his voice steady but tinged with something new, something real. "I want you to be a part of Steel Industries, not as a token gesture, not as someone in the background, but as a true partner. I've learned more from you in the past few weeks than I ever could have on my own. You're the missing piece of this puzzle, and I want you with me, as an equal." Aiko looked at him, her expression unreadable. She had always known that Logan was driven by power, but in this moment she saw something else in him, a vulnerability that was both unfamiliar and compelling. He was offering her the world, but not as a transaction. He was offering her something deeper, a chance to shape something together, to build something that transcended wealth and status. But Aiko wasn't ready to make that leap. Not yet. "I can't accept that, Logan," she said softly, her voice steady. "Not because I don't value you, or because I don't appreciate what you're offering, but because I need to build my own path. I can't be a part of your world if it means losing my own." Logan's face tightened, but he didn't press her. He knew the strength it had taken for her to say those words. "Then help me build something together," he said, his tone resolute. "Something that's not just about business or wealth. Something real, something meaningful." Aiko's gaze softened. This was the Logan Steele she had been waiting to see. The one who was willing to embrace change, willing to listen, and most importantly, willing to let go of control. "I'll help you build something," Aiko replied. "But it has to be something that transcends everything we've known. Something authentic. Something that has meaning beyond money." In that moment, Logan realized that Aiko had just given him the ultimate lesson. Strength didn't lie in control or power. It lay in the ability to embrace vulnerability, to build something together that was greater than the sum of its parts. And with that, a new chapter began for both of them, one that would take them on a journey of transformation and ultimately self-discovery. It had been months since that fateful night at Kaze Heights, the night when Logan Steele's world had cracked open, revealing a truth he'd been too afraid to face. The decision to put Aiko's insights into action wasn't a mere business strategy. It was a turning point for both of them. What started as a challenge, a collision of worlds, had transformed into a partnership that redefined their futures. After countless meetings, late-night conversations, and deep soul-searching, Logan and Aiko had decided to embark on something entirely new. They agreed to create a company together, one that would not be driven by the cold pursuit of profit, but by a deeper purpose. Their vision wasn't to build another empire for the sake of wealth or influence. They sought to use their combined skills, their shared insights, and their passion for change to empower others. The idea was simple yet profound. Harness technology to benefit communities in meaningful ways. They weren't looking to disrupt industries or outdo competitors. They wanted to create something that made people's lives better, something that could genuinely lift others up. Their company, which they named Icon Technologies, was born out of this shared vision. The name itself was a blend of their two worlds, Aiko's name, representing culture, heritage, and strength, and Logan's desire to build something transformative, something that could change the narrative around success and wealth. At first, the road was anything but smooth. Logan, ever the strategist, knew how to navigate the complexities of business. But Aiko brought something he couldn't have anticipated: empathy, a sense of responsibility, and an understanding of the power of community. Where Logan saw potential for expansion, Aiko saw the need for sustainability. Where Logan focused on efficiency, Aiko pushed for inclusivity. Together, they created something that wasn't just another tech startup. It was a movement.
Icon Technologies was designed to provide affordable technology solutions to underserved communities around the world.
From developing mobile apps to increase access to education in rural areas, to creating software that helped local businesses in developing countries thrive, Aiko and Logan were determined to make a lasting impact. The first major project they took on was a digital platform designed to empower women in low-income areas. The platform provided resources for entrepreneurship, offering free access to online courses, mentorship programs, and financial tools that would help women start and grow their own businesses. It wasn't about charity, it was about opportunity, independence, and giving people the tools to thrive on their own. As the company began to take shape, so did Aiko's role within it. No longer just a partner in name, she became the heart of the company, the moral compass that guided their decisions. She was everywhere, meeting with community leaders, listening to the people who would ultimately benefit from the technology they created, ensuring that every step they took was grounded in the values they both held dear. Her influence stretched far beyond the walls of the company. She had become a role model for those who felt torn between two worlds, particularly for those who, like her, had to balance their heritage with their place in the modern world. Aiko's story, her willingness to stand firm in her beliefs while embracing growth and change, inspired countless others to do the same. Aiko's legacy was not about the money she had turned down or the power she had refused to claim. It was about the courage to be true to herself, to challenge the status quo, and to forge a path that was uniquely her own. Through her actions, she had shown that true strength lay not in conforming, but in embracing who you were, no matter the world around you. For Logan, the transformation was equally profound. He had spent most of his life defining success by the size of his wealth, the power he wielded, and the influence he commanded. But as ICANN technologies grew, so did his understanding of what truly mattered. Logan had learned, through Aiko, that money and power weren't the ultimate markers of success. They were tools, nothing more. The most meaningful things in life were the connections we formed, the people we challenged, and the way we grew together. He had learned to be vulnerable, to accept that there was more to life than controlling everything. Aiko had shown him that true leadership came not from being at the top, but from lifting others up. There was a moment, shortly after they launched the first phase of their project, that Logan knew this transformation was complete. He had been invited to speak at a global tech conference about the impact ICANN technologies was having in the world. Standing in front of an audience of the world's top CEOs and innovators, Logan realized that in this moment, he wasn't just speaking for himself. He was speaking for the people they had helped, for the women who were starting their own businesses, for the communities that were gaining access to opportunities they had never imagined. He was speaking for Aiko, who had shown him the true meaning of success. Later that evening, as Logan and Aiko sat on the balcony of their new office, overlooking the city lights, Logan turned to her with a smile. "I never thought I'd say this," he began, "but I think I'm finally learning what real success looks like." Aiko smiled back, her eyes soft with affection. "You're not alone in that. We're both learning." They were no longer two people from separate worlds. They were partners, in every sense of the word. Together, they had created something bigger than themselves, something that would outlast any business venture Logan had ever built. They had created a legacy, not one of wealth, but one of purpose. And in that moment, as they sat side by side, Logan understood that the greatest transformation wasn't in the company they had built. It was in themselves. Standing together in the soft glow of the evening light, Logan and Aiko had come a long way since their first encounter at Kaze Heights. The restaurant, once a place of mockery and tension, now seemed distant, almost like a lifetime ago. Here, on the rooftop of their new office, the city sprawled below them, a symbol of everything they had built together. Logan Steele, the man who had once ruled his empire with an iron fist, now found himself standing beside Aiko as an equal. They were no longer bound by the expectations of their families or the societal pressures that had shaped their paths. Instead, they were bound by something far more powerful: their shared values,
their respect for one another, and their belief that together they could create something that would truly make a difference. They had done it. ICANN Technologies wasn't just a company. It was a reflection of who they were as individuals and as partners. It was a symbol of the journey they had taken, from conflict to collaboration, from self-interest to mutual respect. And it wasn't just about the technology they had developed or the projects they had launched. It was about the culture they had created together. A culture of empathy, of understanding, of challenging one another to grow beyond the confines of their own worlds. As the wind whispered through the city streets, Logan turned to Aiko, his eyes softer than they had ever been. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to think I was self-made, that everything I had earned on my own." Aiko looked up at him, her gaze steady. "You still are, Logan. But I think now you see that being self-made isn't just about individual achievement. It's about recognizing the people who help shape you, the experiences that challenge you, and the understanding that no one succeeds in isolation." Logan smiled, nodding.
He had come to understand that truth in ways he never could have imagined before meeting Aiko. When he had first built his empire, it had been all about him, his vision, his ambition, his success. But now, as he stood alongside Aiko, he realized that true success was never about standing alone at the top. It was about building something with others, learning from their experiences, and embracing the power of collaboration. Their company was a perfect reflection of that philosophy. It wasn't just about using technology to make a profit. It was about using technology to make the world better, to open doors for those who had been shut out, and to empower people in ways that went beyond just monetary gain. Aiko's insistence on keeping their focus on purpose, not just profit, had been the driving force behind everything they had accomplished, and it had changed Logan. The true cost of arrogance, Logan realized, was not just financial. It was the cost of never truly understanding the world beyond one's own bubble. In his pursuit of power, wealth, and control, Logan had been blind to the realities of those who didn't have the same advantages he had. Aiko had opened his eyes to the broader picture, teaching him that empathy and understanding were as important as business strategy. As he watched Aiko, he saw someone who had never needed to be told how to be strong, someone who had always understood the value of heritage, family, and identity. Her humility, her ability to balance pride in her roots with an openness to the future, had taught him that true strength didn't come from dominance. It came from knowing who you were and owning it, even when the world tried to tell you to be something else. "Aiko," Logan said softly, his voice tinged with sincerity, "I never would have gotten here without you. Not just because of your insights into business, but because of the way you challenged everything I thought I knew about success, about life." Aiko smiled,
her expression calm but warm. "We've challenged each other, Logan. We've pushed each other to grow in ways that neither of us expected." Logan nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for everything Aiko had brought into his life. She had helped him build a future that wasn't just about wealth. It was about purpose, legacy, and impact. And in return, he had given her the freedom to pursue her own dreams, to never feel constrained by the expectations of those around her. Their partnership wasn't just about business. It was about mutual respect, about understanding that each of them brought something invaluable to the table. They had learned from each other, grown with each other, and now they were looking forward to a future that they would build together, hand in hand. As they stood there, the future ahead of them seemed limitless. Logan no longer saw himself as a man who had built his empire on his own. He saw himself as part of something greater, something that included Aiko's heritage, their shared experiences, and the power of mutual respect. It wasn't just about the deals they made or the profits they earned. It was about the lives they touched, the people they helped, and the difference they made. And as Aiko stood beside him, her hand resting lightly in his,
Logan knew that the most meaningful thing he had ever done wasn't building a business. It was building a life with her. Together, they were going to change the world. Aiko had taught him that, and in the process, she had shown him what true strength really looked like. And for that, he would be forever grateful.